pretense that I haven't even seen at the age of 40. What are we doing? Why are we not safeguarding them? How did we end up medicalising without any sort of trials, without actually seeing how this would pan out, medicalising essentially a dysphoria, which is a psychological condition, without saying, is this the right way forward? Is this what we should be doing? And it did become a toxic debate. It did become a culture war.
And on that point, the point that Emma's making,
right,
that actually politicians have stoked some of that toxicity and tension.
No, actually, do you know what? Thank goodness for the culture wars, because without the culture wars, we wouldn't have the Cass report. I think politicians have actually...
Hang on, the Cass report was about the treatment the young people were getting.
Yes, but I actually think that without people shouting, this feels wrong, this doesn't feel right, most politicians joined the tyranny of silence. Another cohort were actively calling people fascistic and evil and homophobic and transphobic for saying, hold on, is this the right approach to take? We don't allow children to get tattoos at the age of 16. You know, we need to give due care, time and consideration to these things, not force neo-religions down people's throats. And on this subject, no, I think, you know,
briefly, because we have got other questions to get to.
This all comes down to, like I said, what's happened in the 21st century, which is we live in an advertised era connected to the internet, and Silicon Valley's attitude has been move fast and break things. Our government needs to be less reactive and more defensive, and look for issues and face them down before they arise.
Okay. Dan Jarvis.
Well, I have to say, I don't think that there is any place for culture wars when it comes to the welfare of our children, and I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful for the sensitive and sensible way in which the question was framed. And I thought Andrew's response was excellent, in that he acknowledges, as I acknowledge, that the government, of course, has a pivotal role to play in terms of protecting children. But I think as politicians, we have an absolute responsibility to debate these incredibly sensitive and difficult issues in a respectful way, not least because in some cases we're talking about some of the most vulnerable children in our society. Now, I hope that Dr. Cass's report provides us with an opportunity to actually make some real progress. She was particularly keen to make the point that point scoring on either side does prevent proper discussion about these matters. And of course, clinicians, parents, we all want the best for our children at this crucial development stage, and I think that this report provides evidence-led framework to deliver. So I hope the government will act now on it, but if they don't, then we will.
Okay, and in a word, Andrew, because we are pressed for time, can the government commit that it's going to deliver on this report, implement the recommendations in the Cass report?
So we've already banned puberty blockers, and there's already steps been taken by NHS England. We will respond in due course to the full recommendations, but this is a very high priority.
Thank you all very much indeed. Let Anita know what you think about this issue. 03700 100 but I do want to get on to this next question, because a lot of people asked about this subject. We don't have a huge amount of time, panellists, but I do want your thoughts on this important issue. And this question comes from Arsalan Qasemi. Hello.
Hi. Is the illegal Migration Act not just a political game played with human life?
Thank you. I think you've got experience of this. Just briefly tell me, what do you think? What do you think, Arsalan?
I've been through the asylum process myself, and now work with people seeking asylum. We think a lot of the illegal Migration Act is impractical for the government to deliver. So is this just the government trying to win votes, but actually at the expense of human life?
Thank you very much indeed. We did get a lot of questions about that here in Halifax. This is actually an area that's become, or asked to become, a council of sanctuary for refugees and asylum seekers. I think I'm right in saying. We've only got a few minutes on the programme for panel. It's an important issue. It's one we've discussed before and we will return to. But your thoughts on this specifically, if I can. Andrew Stevenson.
So, stopping the boats is about saving lives. It is about stopping people traffickers from being able to practice what is modern-day slavery. Small boat crossings are down by 36%.
Well, they're going up at the start of this year, aren't they?
They're down year on year. They're down 36%. But we need to go further.
The first 3 months of the year, just to be clear, the first 3 months of each year, they're up on the first 3 months compared to last year.
And we know by looking at the statistics that they vary month on month. So looking at year on year, 36% down. But we need to go further by getting the deterrence plan fully operational. Now we're doing lots of other things, you know, the work we've done with France, the work we've done with the Albanian government that has reduced Albanians making that dangerous crossing by over 90%. But we need a clear deterrence in place, and therefore I will be supporting the legislation as it returns to the Commons next week.
This is the Rwanda bill you're talking about, back in when the Commons sits again next week. Enver Solomon?
Well, the Illegal Migration Act is an ill-thought-out piece of legislation that is going to create huge human misery, costs and chaos. And there's a really important point that we all need to understand about what this legislation is actually going to do. It means that people's asylum claims will not be processed. And entirely predictably, it will result, and it's already resulting, in tens of thousands of people in the UK whom the government is going to have to pay to look after, who will be left indefinitely in limbo with nothing to do, unable to work. They won't have their claim heard fairly in the UK. The right to asylum will be extinguished, and the government is leading us into an even greater mess than is already existing in an asylum system that they have broken, because they've decided to give up on processing asylum applications. It is going to cause a huge, huge mess, and it's costing you, the taxpayers, an awful lot of money. And finally, it just doesn't need to be like this. Process asylum claims fairly in the UK, treat people with humanity, dignity and respect their rights.
We've only got 2 minutes on the programme, so I have to ask you to be brief. Alex?
Yeah, I have to say that Emma makes a very salient point when it comes to processing. There's a huge failure in our system, and people are waiting 2 years more to be processed. That's just ridiculous. If you shouldn't be here because you've come here illegally, if you don't have a right to claim asylum, then you shouldn't be here for 2+ years living in a hotel and getting government benefits. If you have a return policy, you go back to the country from whence you came. But if you are supposed to be here because you're a genuine asylum seeker, no, I just said if you've got no right. Look, what people need to understand, right, is when you have free zone warfare, there's essentially operating channels of mass migration. There are people involved in this who are genuine asylum seekers and refugees, and we must protect them, and we do as a nation. There are other people opportunising this system and gaming the system, and there are others still connected to criminal cartels who should have absolutely no right entering this country. So what we need to do is be realistic.
We've got to let Dan have to say in our last minute.
We need to, and it's right, we have to process it so we can differentiate those who do belong to Remain and those that do not.
Okay, we will return to this subject. Dan, briefly, your thoughts?
So, I mean, let's just be honest about it. Sound public policy decision-making is not driving the government's approach to immigration. Andrew spoke about the Rwanda policy. I mean, it is a public policy gimmick. It will cost £2 million per person to return people to, or send people to Rwanda. Former immigration minister admitted it was just essentially a gimmick to evidence some kind of activity. We do need to end the vile trade which brings people across the channel, and that's why we need to invest in the NCA and work more closely with our international partners.
Thank you all very much. Thank you for raising the issue. We will return to it, but in the meantime, why don't you pick up this conversation by picking up the call and giving Anita a ring? 03700 100 444. That's it from now.
Seized a ship linked to Israel and is transferring to its territorial waters. State media said special forces from the Iranian Revolutionary Guards boarded the container vessel in the Strait of Hormuz. There are 25 crew members on board. The Israeli military says a 14-year-old boy who went missing from a settlement in the occupied West Bank has been found dead. An army spokesman said Benjamin Achimayeh, who vanished after taking a flock of sheep out to graze, had been murdered. Protesters who delayed last year's Grand National have said they won't disrupt this afternoon's race. 100 activists from Animal Rising were arrested last year after getting into Aintree and delaying the event for 15 minutes. BBC News.
In 45 minutes, Alice is having a bad day in the Archers at 2:45. But first on Radio 4, it's time for Any Answers with Anita Arland.
Arlene, thank you very much. Good afternoon. Welcome to Any Answers. A lot to talk about today, and it all feels so very imminent, doesn't it? The possibility of direct military confrontation between Iran and Israel came closer this week. Just last night, the White House said a strike by Iran on Israel is a real and credible threat, and it could happen sooner rather than later. We've heard that Iranian forces have taken over a cargo ship and are escorting it to Iranian waters. If there is a conflict, if this does escalate and build, what should the UK response be? Should we remain in lockstep with America? Are we prepared for escalating conflict? The number 03700 100 444. The Labour leader said this week that his government would increase defence spending by 2.5% of GDP, and Keir Starmer said he'd renew Trident too. I wonder, does he have your blessing? Do you think the money would be better spent on essential services, schools, hospitals, fighting poverty? Can we afford to spend this much on defence? And looking at the world as it is, can we afford not to? 03700 100 444. Given the harm caused by polarised views in the trans debate, highlighted by the Cass report, what role does government have, do you think, in protecting young people? And I'm really very keen this afternoon to hear from people who have direct experience on this. 03700 100 444. And finally, is the Illegal Migration Act a political game being played with human lives? Maybe you have experience of the asylum process. Maybe you have experience of border control. I'd love to hear from you. How could we, how should we be doing this better? 03700 100 444. You can, of course, text 84844. Texts will be charged at your standard message rate. Or tweet us for free. Hashtag BBCAQ is where you will find it. Let us start, though, with the story that has been leading bulletins most of yesterday and most of this morning. The possibility of military confrontation between Iran and Israel, and where should Britain stand in this? Lorraine Spiro is our first caller, calling from Whitstable. Hello.
Hello, lovely to have you.
Very lovely to have you on, Lorraine. Thank you for calling. So, I mean, first of all, the world feels like a very uneasy place today, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Could be worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, go on. You said, I suppose, tell me what you were going to say.
I suppose it could be worse. I mean, if we actually had a nuclear war, then it could always be worse, wouldn't it? So unfortunately, right now, we can't say something.
Yeah, well, okay, that is completely correct. What should Britain's position be, do you think, if things do escalate?
I think that Britain needs to be 100% behind Israel, no matter what. 100%.
Okay, tell me why. And when you say no matter what do you mean?
I mean that the Jewish people have been, through millennia, scapegoated for the problems of other peoples. And now it's particularly the Muslims that look towards Jewish people as their scapegoats, and this absolutely has to stop. Israel is a country that does support Arabs who live within it, and Arabs are heads of companies, and they help run the government, and they help to run banks. And what you have to understand is that the Jewish people are really good stewards of the land. And I've been to Israel a few times. I have to say that I stood on the Golan Heights and I looked in one direction and saw the sea, and I looked in the other direction and saw the Jordan Valley, and I thought, it can't be true. It can't be that small. It's like saying that Whitstable has to be a different country from Canterbury. It can't happen. So what I see is a really good solution that no one's talked about is to have the Jewish country of Israel taking control of the West Bank and of Gaza and just letting everybody live at peace, because they're really, really good stewards. And also to bring the communities together. There are schools in Israel called Hand in Hand, where Jewish and Arab children study and learn together. There's a Jewish village called Neve Shalom, which is run equally by Jewish people and Arab people, and it works very, very well. There are all sorts of things going on there to help support integration in terms of respect for different communities. There was a big conference in Haifa on the 6th of October, the night before the big event, which was all about peace, and there were hundreds of people there from different communities to discuss this very issue. So Israel is making a tremendous effort. I'm not talking about the far right, but I actually think that if everybody in both Palestine and Israel, and that includes Gaza and the Golan Heights, went to mixed schools and they made friends with people from their other communities, if they had 10 friends, if every Jewish family had a 10 friend that was Arab, and every Arab family did the same from Palestine, whether or not they met, that would start to build connection and care between the communities.
I have many questions. I'm going to introduce you to another caller in a minute, because I think it'd be interesting to hear what we both have to say to each other. But honestly, do you think that kind of holding hands, the mixed school relationship, is going to do anything when you have a backdrop of what has gone on in Gaza, the loss of life in Gaza, the kind of catastrophe that is catastrophe that is facing the people there who don't have food and don't have water?